Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends, published by Osprey Games and designed by Nigel and Dávid Turczi. Alright, so here is a basic setup of a solo game of Imperium Classics in this case, because I'm going to be doing a playthrough in the next week or so, that should be next week's video, that is going to be the Carthaginians, that's me, versus the Roman bot. So basically the idea behind Imperium is that you have 8 factions in the Classics box, 8 factions in the other box, which is the Imperium Legends box, and they all play very, very differently. So you can play as a number of different empires, basically, or would-be empires. You start as a barbarian state, but you can play as the Vikings, you can play as the Olmecs, you can play as the Egyptians, you can play as the Persians, or in this case, the Carthaginians and the Romans. And they all have very, very different rules. So every faction that you play is going to be a bit different, and then every bot you play is going to do different things. The general arc, although there are exceptions because everybody's doing something different, is that you start as a barbarian state and you eventually want to become an empire. And there are also cards out here that you can only actually make use of in certain phases. So for example, if it's got the red barbarian marker on it, you can only use it when you're still barbarian. And then you have civilized cards that you can only use when you become an empire. So you got to keep it on your deck, time things appropriately, etc. There are also different suits of cards that are out here. So this flag is a tributary, uncivilized cards, regions, and civilized cards. Tributaries are mixed up with everything else in this main deck, but you also have smaller decks of just civilized, uncivilized, and region cards to pull from. There are also some fame cards up here that'll net you some nice, chunky victory points. So depending on who you're playing, you're going to be incentivized to acquire different kinds of cards and do different things. So I'm not going to trouble you with a huge explanation here. However, what I will tell you is that basically the idea is the same in any game, which is just to get the most points. I want more points than the bot, and that's really what it comes down to. And I'm going to be doing a mixture of deck building by getting cards from the market and tableau building, so making different actions available to myself in order to pull that off. So for those of you who've never seen the game before, this layout up top is pretty much just a 2-player layout. This is bot stuff. Here's my area, and here's bot area. The game ends either when you trigger scoring, so I can do that by using all my development cards. The bot can do that by working through their entire dynasty deck, which is their deck that they automatically draw from, or between us, we can make the main deck run out. The other way to end the game and trigger scoring is to take that King of Kings card at the bottom of the fame deck. However, there is another way to end the game that does not involve scoring, because you caused a total societal collapse, and that is when you have these unrest cards. And basically, if you have taken the entire supply of unrest cards and put them out into your hands and under cards out here, etc., and then you need to draw another one and you can't, guess what? You ruined the world. All of the civilizations collapsed and everyone loses, which you would probably prefer to avoid unless you think that you're not going to win anyway and you are spiteful. So essentially, get cards that score you points, deny the enemy cards that score them points, try not to ruin everything. So this is my player area here, and it looks a lot more confusing than it is. Trust me, it is totally doable if you've ever played deck builder before, especially. So this card here that's under all these tokens, let's just make a mess, why not? This is my little civilization card. It's got a B side, which is recommended for beginners. It's got its own little special ability. And then there's an A side that has a different, chunkier special ability. And every civilization you play is going to have 2 options, but they're going to look different from all the other ones because everybody plays different. As for the stuff that I had in the card, basically when you activate, which is one of the things we're going to talk about in a moment, you can take 3 actions typically. So these are my action markers. You can do 5 exhaust abilities, and those allow you to exhaust cards to get stuff done. So you can actually do quite a bit on a turn once you've built up a nice chunky tableau. You get 1 progress, which could be either used to trade for resources or to get a victory point at the end of the game. Population, which is 1 kind of resource, you get 2 of those. And you get 3 materials just to start with. And you'll of course want to acquire more because they are used to make stuff happen in the game. You'll have your normal player deck with a starting hand of 5. So note there's an unrest card in there. Your deck starts a little bit clogged. And some of these cards you can just play as an action, and then others will actually go into a tableau and permanently stay there for you to use your exhaust abilities. Some of your cards will actually leave your deck altogether and go into your history, so they go under this main civilization card, but we won't go into that level of detail for this overview. And of course, this is a deck builder. That means you need to get more cards. How do we do that? So you can take stuff from the market, and you'll definitely want to do that. You also add to your deck by cycling through it, and then every time you would reshuffle your discard pile to make a new deck, you take a card from your Dynasty deck and put it in. And basically what you're doing is you're working your way from barbarity, I guess, towards having an empire. So once you pick up this card, you flip from barbarian to empire, and then you get access to these development cards, which give you a bit more control. When you do a development card acquisition, you get to pick which one you want, and that means that they get to be face up and you get to have some strategy control. So without going into too much detail, since it's different for every faction, that's a basic overview of how things are for you. Your turn itself is actually fairly simple. You can choose 3 different things to do. You can activate, you can innovate, or you can revolt. And then you have to clean up after yourself, you wicked imperialist. All right, so activate. That means you get to take your 3 actions and your 5 exhaust abilities. I keep wanting to call them actions, but I should not. So when you activate, that's when you're getting cards, playing cards, activating abilities on cards you've already played, and essentially making the most of what is in your actual hand. However, sometimes you may really need a card or you don't like your hand, in which case you have the choice to innovate. When you innovate, what that means is that you discard your entire hand, so goodbye to all those cards, and sometimes you want to do that, especially because cycling through does get you new cards, so that's pretty cool. But in exchange for discarding your hand, you get to do what's called breaking through. So when you break through, you can choose a suit. So you can choose uncivilized, civilized, region, or tributary. So the different symbols on the cards. And basically, if I want a region, I can just take something, I can either take this card, or I can go take something straight from the region deck. Although this is actually better when it's not a region that you want, because if I take this leadership card using breakthrough, I don't have to also pick up this unrest card and keep gumming up my deck. So breaking through is a more efficient way to get cards. Or if you don't like what's out there, to get cards that maybe you haven't had a chance at on the market yet. If you want a tributary, or if one of these decks is empty and you want something from it, then you can go into the main deck and just sift through there until you break through and get the kind of card that you were hunting for. So basically it's a way to exercise a little bit more control over your build and get stuff consequence-free, except that you have to pay cards for it. And then the other thing you can do is revolt. So as I mentioned, you're going to get unrest cards in your hand, you'll want to get rid of them. Sometimes they get really out of control, or you want to really make sure that the supply stays full so you don't all lose. So you can do what's called a revolt. That basically means that you give up the rest of your turn in order to take all of the unrest cards that are in your hand and put them back in the supply. So that's actually it. There's a lot going on, but the individual things that you're allowed to do on every turn will make sense once you dig into the game. So don't ever let it overwhelm you, because you're going to be okay. Now let's talk about the bot. So the bot is pretty ingenious, actually. It has to do a lot, but it's all very manageable. You might describe it as fiddly, but everything is within your power. So over here we have the Romans. Here is their deck. And actually these 5 cards are also from their deck, because they're going to be cycling through their stuff too. They also have this solstice card. There's a solstice event that happens every round that will affect you and some of your cards, so keep track of this. But basically the way the bot turn works is this. You take a die and you roll it. Oh no, I rolled a 6. That's actually terrible. I'm going to talk about what happens with the 6 in just a second. So let's say we rolled a 5. So here, if we roll a 5, what that means is that we don't activate discard, but we activate 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we just slide this one down into the 1 spot for next turn. So no matter what on a turn, the bot's going to activate at least 4 cards. If you roll a 6, however, it activates all 5, which can really stink. As for what it does, it's actually not super complicated. You don't have to do all the card text and like try to interpret it for the bot or anything like that. Instead, at the back of the rule book for the solo mode, there are a bunch of bot charts. So here are the Romans when they're a barbarian civilization. Here's what you do with the Romans when they are an empire. And if you look a little more closely, basically you are looking at the card to determine what kind of card it is, and then you're taking the corresponding action over here to that card type. Some of the bot actions will allow it to take cards, some of them will allow it to attack you and make you do things that you don't want to do, and all of them are designed to make the bot move through its deck faster too, because the bot also has a dynasty deck that gives it points and that it's going to try to exhaust. And again, every bot is going to work quite differently, so it will feel like playing against a different kind of AI every time. And that, my fellow gamers, is a quick overview of Imperium. It works for both Classics and Legends since it's the same game system, just with different factions in each box. All right, so now for some final thoughts. Overall, I'm just going to say that Imperium is a really interesting and good game system that gives you a whole lot of variety and a lot to think about. So let's talk about that first, and then I'll add some caveats at the end. I think the best thing about Imperium, especially for a solo gamer who has both boxes, is just the sheer variety. I really like being able to test out different factions, and not only that, but to test those factions against different bots, so you can really have a different game every time you play, and it doesn't get stale very quickly, even if you play again and again and again. So that alone is, I think, a really cool achievement for this game. Beyond that, there is just a lot to think about, and I really enjoy that. So as a certain faction, you will be incentivized to look for particular cards in your deck and to try to get particular types of cards off of the market. So if you play the same faction again and again, maybe it would feel a little bit repetitive, but there's also a lot of strategy to that, and it's really enjoyable to get to know a faction, to know what development cards you might want to pick up, to have a sense of what cards are out there for you to acquire for your deck and get really good combos built up. You know, by the end of the game, you feel super powerful. Like, you really did develop from someone who was living in a wattle and daub hut into, you know, a full-on empire made of marble and glory. So the sense of growth in the game, especially when you know what you're doing and know how to put together combos, is massively satisfying. And when you have a really good game of Imperium, it feels awesome. I also appreciate that the AI is a little bit fiddly, I admit that, but for a game that's this complicated, I think it's really easy to run, and I actually really appreciated that. So it's not, you know, the easiest AI in the whole world where you just flip one card and you're done and you're back to your turn, but I really like that they took all of the complex decisions that you're making and boiled it down into something that is botable. Also, if you like history, the game is fun. I wouldn't say that it's making any serious historical statements in any way, but it's, you know, I got a real kick out of it, and it's fun to be able to be the Romans, or to be the Persians, or to be the Carthaginians, and, you know, just kind of role play as ancient civilizations, if you're a history nerd like me. So now for a couple of caveats. I think the first big one is the rulebook. It's hard to express, but all of the rules are there. The rulebook is clear. There are rules in there that make sense. But you know how you can sometimes read a rulebook and get a sense of how the game is played, but other times you can't? I would say that with Imperium, you're dealing with one of the situations where you really, really can't, and it's hard to really understand how the game is going to work from reading the rules. It's like there's something that's a little bit abstracted from you in there that makes it hard to understand how to play. Also, while the rules are fairly clear, there's also a lot that's been left out. I would not play this game, either box, without checking the errata on Board Game Geek. There's a massive rule for the bots for unrest cards that is a big deal and that really affects gameplay. And, you know, the Chin bot from the Legends box basically does not really work at all as printed. And so you have to go onto Board Game Geek, look at the corrections, and get a different bot file there that's going to correct some of the problems. So I'm not too surprised that this happened, given that the game has so much variety and there's clearly so much experimentation and kind of wild stuff going on between the factions. At the same time, be warned, this is what's going to happen to you. And the other thing that I would say is that while I do like building up big combos and I find the game really satisfying, sometimes I feel like it's maybe a little too much. Like, it's maybe too long, there are maybe too many piles of cards that the feeling this game gives me could have been packed into a more streamlined game. And so I think that Imperium is fun as it is, and I really like it, but I also think that it could be a little bit shorter, a little bit tighter, a little bit simpler. But at the same time, you know, maybe with this much variety, you just have to accept the mess as part of the price that you pay for having that many different things to try in a single game. So that said, I really do like Imperium quite a bit. It's definitely staying in my collection for the foreseeable future, both boxes. If you're only going to get one, I'd say maybe Classics because it's got the more standard factions in it. But if you want the more wild experience, I would say get the Legends box. And either way, I give the game an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and happy gaming, everybody.